Ethan stood alone on the edge of the barren planet, staring into the fierce storm that seemed to swallow the world around him. The wind howled, throwing sand and dust in every direction, as lightning crackled in the sky. He had been stranded here for days, his communication systems down, and the chances of getting rescued were slim to none. He had been sent on a mission to investigate an ancient alien structure, but something had gone wrong. Now he was lost, cut off from everything. His only company was the silence of the planet and the weight of his thoughts. Ethan wasn't a man used to being alone, but on this alien world, loneliness seemed to be his constant companion. His friends had turned away from him, his co-workers had betrayed him, and now, the only thing left to guide him was the hope that somehow he could survive this. His boots sank deep into the soft, shifting sand as he trudged through the storm. He wasn't sure where he was going. There was nothing in the distance but endless dunes and an occasional rock formation. The atmosphere of this planet was thick with a kind of oppressive weight, as if the air itself was too heavy to breathe. Then just as he was about to give in to the hopelessness of his situation, something caught his eye, a faint glow, like a beacon in the distance. It wasn't much, barely visible through the sandstorm, but it was enough to catch his attention. Ethan squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. At first, he thought it was just the storm playing tricks on him. But the glow seemed real, and it pulsed faintly, as if it were alive. He couldn't ignore it. Something about the light drew him in, a strange feeling pulling him toward it, like a whisper in the dark. He adjusted his course and began moving in the direction of the light, his steps quickening despite the harsh conditions. As he got closer, the glow grew brighter, and he began to make out a shape. It was strange, unlike anything he had ever seen before. It looked like a figure, but not quite human. The being was sitting on the ground, a faint shimmer surrounding it, as if it were cloaked in an aura. Ethan's heart raced. Could it be an alien? He had heard stories, of course, but he had never imagined he would encounter one firsthand. His mind screamed at him to turn back. This was dangerous, he knew that. But his legs moved before he could think, driven by a mix of curiosity and something deeper, something he couldn't explain. He reached the figure, standing a few feet away, hesitating. The being didn't seem to notice him, its head lowered. The storm howled louder, but the figure remained still, as though unaffected by the chaos around it. Ethan could barely make out details. The alien skin was a pale, almost translucent shade of blue, and it had no legs. Instead, its body ended in a smooth, rounded base. Ethan stared, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. "Are you okay?" he asked hesitantly, his voice barely audible over the storm. The alien didn't respond at first, its body unmoving. Then, slowly, it lifted its head. Its face was delicate, yet fierce, with large, wide eyes that shone with an unnatural glow. Despite its strange appearance, there was something human about it, something that drew Ethan in, a quiet sadness that spoke directly to his heart. I can't move," the alien said, its voice soft but clear. It was a sound that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. A voice unlike any he had ever heard, smooth yet full of an unspoken pain. "Don't worry. I'll help you," Ethan said, stepping closer. But as he approached, he noticed something strange. There was a deep weariness in the alien's eyes, something that suggested it had been alone for far too long. Its expression was distant, as though it had given up on hope long ago. "I am Jira," the alien said quietly. Her voice seemed to carry the weight of years of solitude. "I was left behind." Ethan crouched beside her, unsure of what to say. He could see that she had no legs, and her body was partially buried in the sand. It looked like she had been there for a long time, struggling to survive. But how? How could she survive without legs in a place like this? "What happened to you?" Ethan asked gently, trying to sound reassuring, though he wasn't sure how. "How did you get here?" Jira's eyes flickered, and for a moment, it seemed as though she was debating whether to speak or not. Her fingers twitched slightly, but she didn't reach out for help. Ethan waited, giving her the time she needed. "I was part of a great people," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A people who once ruled the stars, but we were betrayed. And now I am alone." The words she spoke didn't make much sense to Ethan, but the sadness in her eyes was undeniable. This wasn't just some alien. This was a being who had known great loss, who had seen her world fall apart. "Let me help you," Ethan said again, his voice stronger now. "You don't have to be alone anymore." Jira looked up at him, and for the first time, a faint glimmer of hope seemed to spark in her eyes. But it wasn't just hope. It was the beginning of something more. Ethan didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for certain. His life had just changed forever. He had found an alien, yes, but more than that, he had found someone who had known loneliness just like he had. And in that moment, he knew that no matter how strange or dangerous this situation was, he couldn't turn his back on her. Not now. As the storm raged on around them, the two of them sat in the silence, the beginnings of an unlikely connection growing between them. The storm outside was unrelenting, but inside their small shelter, there was a quiet calm. The walls of the makeshift refuge, made of debris and leftover materials, groaned under the pressure of the wind. Yet, inside, it was oddly peaceful. Ethan sat across from Jira, her pale blue skin almost glowing under the dim light. As she looked at him with those large, luminous eyes, neither of them spoke for a long while. It wasn't because they had nothing to say, it was because words felt unnecessary in this strange moment. Ethan was still processing the shock of finding an alien stranded in the middle of nowhere, and Jira seemed lost in her own thoughts, her gaze distant. Ethan tried to make sense of her. How could she be so calm despite everything that had happened? To her, alone, with no legs, no way to escape the harsh environment, she was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Yet, there was a strength in her that he couldn't ignore. It was subtle, hidden behind the sadness, but it was there. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Jira broke the silence. "You don't have to help me," she said, her voice still soft, but carrying a hint of emotion. "I'm used to being alone." Ethan frowned, unsure of what to say. He didn't want to pry into her past, but something about her words felt wrong. He didn't believe that someone could get used to being alone, not truly. "I don't think anyone can get used to being alone," he said quietly, looking down at the floor. "Not really. We all need someone." Jira's gaze softened, and for the first time since he'd met her, she seemed to consider his words. She was silent for a moment, her eyes focused on the glowing patterns that danced across the walls, a result of the storm's strange energy. "I had a family once," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had a purpose. I led my people, until they betrayed me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. Ethan's heart twisted at the thought of her betrayal. He had never known a life like hers, one filled with such pain and loss. He didn't know how to respond, but he knew one thing for sure. She didn't deserve this. Loneliness. "You're not alone anymore," Ethan said firmly. "I'm here. I'll help you get out of here." Jira's eyes flickered, and she seemed to shrink back, as if the idea of relying on someone else was foreign to her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "There's nothing left for me. I have no home, no purpose. The people I trusted, they took everything from me." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady but full of empathy. "Then we'll find a new purpose. We'll make sure you're not alone anymore." Jira looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the two of them just stared at each other, the weight of their unspoken connection growing between them. It was strange. Ethan had only just met her, but it felt like he had known her for much longer. There was something in her eyes, something that mirrored the loneliness he had felt for years, the isolation he had carried with him from his own past. A strange silence passed between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if they both understood something important, even if they couldn't quite put it into words. There was no need for speeches or promises. They had found something in each other, something that felt real, raw, and unbreakable. As the storm raged outside, they both sat in the shelter, each lost in their own thoughts. Ethan could hear the wind howling, but it felt distant, as if the world around them had fallen away. Here, in this small space, it was just the two of them, two beings, both broken in their own ways, both searching for something they had lost. Jira broke the silence again, this time with a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You're different," she said, her voice light, almost teasing. "Most humans would have run the other way by now, but you—" She paused, her smile fading slightly as she looked at him with those glowing eyes. "You're not afraid of me." Ethan couldn't help but smile back, though it was tinged with sadness. "I don't scare easily," he said with a shrug. "I've seen my fair share of strange things." Jira nodded slowly, as if she were trying to understand him, or maybe just trying to believe that it was possible for someone to see her, truly see her, without fear. And in that moment, the bond between them grew stronger. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about helping her get off this planet or finding a way out of the storm. It was about something deeper, a connection that neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. Ethan didn't know what the future held for him or for Jira, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to leave her, not now, not ever. And as the storm outside slowly began to subside, they both sat in silence, knowing that this was just the beginning of something far greater than either of them could have imagined. The storm finally began to weaken, its howling winds turning into soft whispers, as if the planet itself were letting out a deep sigh of relief. Ethan and Jira sat in the shelter for a long time, neither of them speaking, yet both understanding that something had shifted between them. What had started as a moment of desperation, an accidental encounter, had now turned into something more. They were no longer strangers in a storm. They were allies united by their pasts, their pain, and their unspoken need for each other's company. But peace was a fleeting thing, especially on a world like this. Ethan stood up first, stretching his arms. His muscles ached from days of rough travel, and he knew they had to move if they were to survive. The storm had passed, but the dangers of the planet weren't gone. In fact, Ethan could feel something in the air, the uneasy silence before a predator strikes. It was too quiet, almost unnatural. Jira seemed to sense it too. Her eyes, usually calm, flickered with a sense of unease. She looked toward the narrow opening of the shelter, her sharp alien senses picking up something beyond the walls. "They're coming," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, yet it held an eerie certainty. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Who's coming?" Her gaze fixed on him, and there was a shadow in her eyes, a mixture of fear and something darker. "My people," she said simply, "but not the ones who left me. These are different. They are hunters." Ethan didn't need to ask more. He understood. These weren't just any pursuers. They were the ones who had been hunting her, the rogue faction she had spoken about. And if they were anything like the ruthless creatures he had read about in the reports, they would stop at nothing to catch her. "How long until they get here?" he asked, his voice low. Jira's eyes narrowed as she focused her attention outward, her mind seemingly reaching out across the desolate landscape. "They'll be here soon. Their ships are fast. I can feel them approaching. They know where we are." Panic gnawed at the edges of Ethan's mind, but he forced it back. If he was going to survive, if Jira was going to survive, he had to remain calm. He had to think. "We can't stay here then," he said, already moving toward the door. "We need to go, now." Jera didn't hesitate. She moved swiftly to her feet, though without legs. She relied on a smooth, graceful motion that seemed almost unnatural. Ethan had no idea how she managed it, but he didn't question it. The alien girl was full of surprises. They moved fast, each of them knowing the stakes were high. They didn't have much time before the hunters would arrive, and the open terrain was not a place for them to hide. Ethan scanned the horizon, his mind racing. There had to be a way to outsmart them, some kind of escape dot as they trekked across the rough landscape. Ethan's thoughts kept returning to Jera's words. Her people, the ones who had betrayed her, had once been powerful, perhaps beyond anything Earth could comprehend. She had told him that she had once led them, that she had been someone important. But something had gone terribly wrong. A mistake, a betrayal, and now she was a target. Jera had told him only fragments of her past, but there was something in her tone, in the way she spoke, that hinted at an ancient power, something far older than Ethan could have imagined. Tattoos on her skin weren't just decorative, they were part of her, a symbol of her people's lost legacy. And now, those tattoos were glowing faintly, a soft light pulsing under her skin. "Can you feel them?" Jera asked, her voice distant, almost like she was listening to something far away. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure exactly what she meant. "Yeah, I feel it too. Something's wrong." Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the ground. The sound was like the roar of a distant animal, the kind that made your skin crawl. Ethan stopped in his tracks, his eyes scanning the horizon. There it was, coming from the north. A ship. The shape was sleek, almost insect-like, its hull shimmering under the dim sky. It was far off, but it was close enough to send a chill down his spine. "They're here," Ethan said, barely above a whisper. "We have to move." Jera didn't respond. She was already in motion, her movements fluid as she navigated the rocky landscape with a surprising grace. Despite her lack of legs, she moved faster than Ethan expected. She wasn't just trying to escape. She was leading the way, as if she knew exactly where to go. Ethan followed her, heart pounding, as the ship drew nearer. He didn't know what Jera's past held, but he knew one thing. These hunters weren't just looking to catch her. They were going to destroy her. And if he didn't act fast, they would destroy him too. The ground beneath their feet trembled again, and Ethan glanced over his shoulder. The ship had entered a low orbit, its engines sending out a low hum that vibrated through the air. It was searching, and it was coming closer. "We're not going to outrun them," Ethan said, frustration creeping into his voice. "What's our plan?" Jera's eyes locked with his, and for the first time, he saw something else in them: determination. It wasn't just the resolve of someone fighting for survival. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had faced impossible odds before. "We don't need to outrun them," she said, her voice steady. "We just need to survive long enough to make them regret ever coming here." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what she meant, but he didn't need to ask. Whatever it was, Jera wasn't just going to hide from her past. She was going to face it head-on. As the ship's shadows grew longer across the desert, Ethan and Jera made their way to the rocky cliffs ahead, their fates tied together by the shadows of the past that were now chasing them both. The rocks were jagged and uneven, cutting through the ground like ancient teeth, their sharp edges threatening to tear through anything that dared approach them. The air was dry, like the remnants of a long-forgotten fire. Ethan and Jera had taken refuge in the shadows of the cliffs, their breaths shallow as they huddled against the harsh environment. The ship of their pursuers was now far above them, hovering like a dark omen against the fading sky, its sleek black outline a constant reminder that their lives were on the line. Jera, though she had no legs, moved with an unnatural ease across the rocky landscape. She seemed to glide more than walk, her body effortlessly adjusting to the terrain. Ethan struggled to keep up, each step feeling like an uphill battle. His muscles burned with exertion, his body weighed down by the burden of both the environment and the emotional weight of his situation. He was out of his depth, stranded on a hostile planet with no real plan, relying on an alien girl who had her own ghosts to outrun. But something about her kept him going. "Are you sure this is the right direction?" Ethan asked, his voice raspy as he tried to catch his breath. Jira didn't answer immediately. Her eyes, however, were scanning the cliffs ahead, her gaze fixed on something only she seemed to understand. "We have to keep moving," she said, her voice steady despite the growing danger. "There's a place up ahead, a safe place." Ethan nodded, even though he wasn't entirely sure he believed her. How could there be a safe place on this godforsaken planet? Every direction they turned seemed to lead them further into peril, but there was something in Jira's words, a quiet confidence that made him trust her. She had lived through things he couldn't even begin to imagine. Her survival instincts were razor sharp, even if she refused to share the details of her past. As they moved through the rocky terrain, Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of his own burden. He had always been a loner. Friends had come and gone, his relationships crumbling under the weight of his own insecurities and failures. It was easy to slip into solitude when no one seemed to care, when the world felt like an endless sea of disappointments. But now, with Jira by his side, everything had changed. It wasn't just about survival anymore. There was something deeper at play, an unspoken connection that neither of them had fully acknowledged yet. Jira, with her quiet strength, had become more than just an alien to him. She was a reflection of everything he had once been, broken, lost, and desperate for something to cling to. He saw her pain in a way that was impossible to ignore. And yet, she had survived, had kept going in the face of unimaginable loss. Ethan had no choice but to keep up with her. But as they climbed higher into the cliffs, he began to realize that this journey wasn't just about escaping their pursuers. It was about something far greater, a reckoning for both of them. For Jira, it was the battle against the forces that had betrayed her. For him, it was a confrontation with his own fear of truly being seen, of allowing someone to rely on him. As they reached a narrow passageway between two massive rock formations, Jira paused, her body tense. "They're getting closer," she muttered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's heart skipped. He had heard the faint hum of engines before, but now it was unmistakable. The hunters were closing in, and there was no place left to hide. The rocky cliffs offered some cover, but they wouldn't be enough to escape the ship's sensors. Ethan turned to Jira, desperation creeping into his voice. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, his words strained. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him like an anvil. Their options were running out, and fast. Jira looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "We don't run anymore," she said, her tone unwavering. "We fight." Ethan blinked, unsure of what she meant. Fight? With what? They were outnumbered, outgunned, and far from any real resources. He wasn't a soldier, and Jira, despite her powers, was still physically vulnerable. What could they possibly fight with? But then he saw it, the flicker of determination in her eyes. Jira had been fighting her entire life, had faced betrayal, loss, and endless pursuit. She wasn't someone who ran from her past. She confronted it head-on. And now she was asking him to do the same. The thought sent a chill through him, but he wasn't about to back down. He wasn't the same man he had been when he first landed on this planet. He had something to fight for now. Not just his survival, but hers too. Ethan turned to face the narrow passageway, taking a deep breath. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "What do we need to do?" Jira gave him a quick glance, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she motioned for him to follow. They pressed forward, deeper into the cliffs where a strange, almost unnatural silence seemed to envelop them. There was no turning back now. Ethan's mind raced as they moved through the passage, his thoughts a blur of confusion and adrenaline. The ship of their enemies was closer, almost overhead now, its black shape casting a shadow over the rocky landscape. And yet, as they neared a large, dark opening in the cliffside, Ethan felt a surge of hope, a faint but undeniable sense of purpose. Jira had led him here for a reason. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a place where they could stand their ground, where they could fight back. With every step, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The burden of his own fears, his own self-doubt, had been holding him back for far too long. And now in this moment, with Jira beside him, he was ready to face whatever came next. Whatever it was, they would face it together. The wind had died down, leaving the night air still and heavy. The landscape around them was silent, as though the planet itself was holding its breath. Ethan and Jira stood at the entrance of the cave, the shadows of the cliff walls stretching long into the dark. The hunt was near, and the sound of distant engines reverberated in the air, vibrating through the ground beneath them. Ethan could feel the weight of their pursuers' presence, like a dark cloud hanging over them. Inside the cave, the air was cooler, a welcome relief from the heat of the day. The walls, smooth and polished by centuries of erosion, glittered faintly in the low light, reflecting a quiet energy that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. Jira moved deeper into the cave, her steps light and graceful, as though she had walked these paths 1,000 times before. Ethan followed her, unsure of what they would find within, but certain that it was their only chance. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper against the stillness of the cave. Jira's eyes, glowing softly in the dim light, flicked back to him. "We need to find the source," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "The place where it all began, the heart of the power I once held." Ethan's brows furrowed. "What do you mean, what power?" Jira didn't answer immediately. She led him deeper into the cave, her movements fluid and confident. The deeper they went, the more intense the energy around them became. It wasn't just the air that felt different. It was something else, something intangible. Ethan could feel it in his bones, a strange hum in the back of his mind, urging him forward. They reached a large chamber at the heart of the cave, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The walls of the chamber were covered in intricate symbols, alien markings that twisted and writhed in patterns he couldn't understand. But there was something familiar about them, something that tugged at the edge of his memory, as though he had seen them before. In the center of the room was a pedestal, ancient and worn, but still standing strong. On top of it was a strange, crystalline object, glowing softly with an inner light. The object seemed to pulse in time with Jira's heartbeat, as if it were alive, as if it were waiting for her. Jira stepped forward, her expression distant, almost reverent. "This is the source of my people's power," she said, her voice barely audible. "The artifact that once gave us the ability to shape the stars themselves. But it was never meant for one person to wield alone." Ethan watched her carefully, his mind racing. "What are you saying, Jira? What's happening?" She turned to him, her eyes filled with a depth of sorrow and determination. "The energy in this place. It's what kept my people strong. But it's also what destroyed us. We sought to control it, to use it for our own gain, and in the end, it tore us apart. The artifact was meant to bind us together, to ensure our unity. But when I refused to use it the way they wanted, they turned on me." Jira reached out, her fingers brushing the crystal lightly. The moment her skin touched it, a surge of energy shot through the chamber, lighting up the symbols on the walls. Ethan staggered back, his head spinning from the sheer power that pulsed through the air. For a moment, everything went white, as though the very cave was alive with the force of 1,000 storms. Then, as quickly as it had come, the energy faded, leaving only the soft glow of the crystal. Jira stood perfectly still, her eyes closed, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. Her breathing was steady, but Ethan could see the strain on her face. He could feel it too, the power in the air, the weight of it pressing down on them both. "This is what they were afraid of," Jira whispered, her voice almost reverent. "The power to control everything, to control life itself." Ethan stepped closer, his concern deepening. "You said it destroyed your people. If we use it, what happens?" Jira's eyes opened, and for the first time, there was a flicker of fear in them. "It's not meant to be controlled, the power it holds. It will break everything if it's used incorrectly." She paused, her gaze falling to the crystal once more. "But I can feel it, it's calling to me. And I can't turn my back on it, not now." Ethan's heart raced as he took another step forward. "What are you going to do?" Jira turned to him, her eyes now burning with an inner fire, a spark of something. "Both terrifying and beautiful. I'm going to fight back. I won't let them have control over this anymore. It's mine." She reached for the crystal again, but this time, Ethan grabbed her wrist, stopping her. "Jira, wait. You don't know what that thing could do." Her gaze softened as she looked at him, her fingers still resting on the crystal. "I've already lost everything," she said quietly. "I've lost my people, my home, but I still have this. And I won't let them take it from me, not again." Ethan's grip loosened, and for a moment, all he could do was watch her. There was no stopping her now. He didn't understand what she was planning, but he understood the look in her eyes. This was more than just survival now. This was about reclaiming something she had lost, something that could change the course of their futures forever. With a deep breath, Jira closed her eyes, and the crystal began to glow brighter, the hum of its power growing louder, vibrating through the cave and into the very core of Ethan's being. The air crackled with energy, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan wondered if they were about to face the end of everything or the beginning of something far more dangerous. Either way, he knew one thing. There was no turning back now. The air was thick with tension as the last of the distant echoes of the hunters' ships faded into silence. The pulse of the crystal had long since dimmed, leaving only a lingering hum that seemed to resonate deep within Ethan's bones. He and Jira stood in the heart of the ancient chamber, surrounded by the soft glow of alien symbols that lined the walls like forgotten memories. The quiet felt oppressive now, like the calm before a storm. And Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had thought he understood, was about to change. Jira was still standing before the pedestal, her eyes closed, as if she were reaching out to something far beyond the walls of this hidden place. Ethan watched her, his thoughts swirling. She had already given him so much, the history of her people, the endless pursuit that had broken her, and now this mysterious glowing artifact that seemed to hold the fate of not just her life, but perhaps the fate of the universe itself. The questions burned in his mind, questions he had been too afraid to ask until now. He stepped forward cautiously, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "Jira, you said you were betrayed, but what happened? What did they do to you?" Her eyes flickered open, and for the first time, her expression shifted. It wasn't just sorrow or rage, it was something deeper, something older, something that hadn't fully surfaced until now. She turned to face him, her face lit by the faint glow of the crystal, and in that light, Ethan saw something he hadn't noticed before, a vulnerability he couldn't ignore. "I was once one of them," she said quietly, her voice raw. "I led my people. I was their commander, their protector. I held the key to everything, the artifact that would ensure our supremacy in the universe. We were going to conquer the stars. Ethan, my people were powerful, more powerful than anything you can imagine." Jira paused, her eyes distant, lost in the memory of something far darker than even she had been willing to admit. "But we were too ambitious. We sought control over everything. The artifact was never meant to be used for that. It was supposed to bring balance, to unite the factions, to ensure peace. But we wanted more. And when I realized what we were becoming, what I was becoming, I refused. I couldn't let my people destroy everything for the sake of power. I left, and they betrayed me. Ethan's heart sank as the pieces of the story clicked together. It wasn't just a simple betrayal, it was a war. A war for control over the artifact. A war for power that had cost Jira everything. Her people had used her, manipulated her, and in the end, they had turned on her because she refused to become part of their corruption. What happened after that? Ethan asked, his voice thick with understanding. Jira's eyes darkened, and she took a step back, her fingers still resting on the glowing crystal. They hunted me. They wanted to erase me, erase the knowledge of what I knew, but I couldn't let them win. So I ran, I hid. I survived. And I learned that this power, this artifact, was never meant to be used by any one person. It was a gift, yes, but it came with a terrible cost. Ethan's mind reeled. Everything he had thought he understood about Jira's past, about her people, was unraveling. This wasn't just about survival. It was about a fractured civilization, a race that had lost its way and was now chasing its own ghost in an attempt to regain control. Jira, what does the artifact really do? He asked, his voice trembling with the weight of the truth he could feel hanging in the air. Why did they want it so badly? And why are you willing to risk everything for it? She looked at him then. Really looked at him, and for a moment, it felt like the entire cave held its breath. Because Ethan, she said softly, her voice shaking for the first time, the artifact holds the key to more than just power. It holds the key to creation itself. With it, I could rebuild what was lost or destroy everything. I was given the choice, and I chose to run. But now, I don't know if I can keep running anymore. Ethan's chest tightened. The weight of her words hit him harder than he had expected. This wasn't just about survival. This wasn't just about finding a way out of their endless chase. This was about fate. The fate of her people. The fate of an entire civilization that had once ruled the stars, and the fate of the universe itself. Jira turned away, her hand still resting on the pedestal, as if drawing strength from it. I thought I could live without it. But every day, I felt its pull. I felt it inside me, calling me back to a place I swore I would never return to. And now that they're coming, now that the hunters are closing in, I know that the time for hiding is over. I have to face them. I have to face what I've done, what I'm capable of. Ethan felt a chill in his bones. This wasn't just a story of betrayal anymore. It wasn't just about a war for power. It was about the choices she had made, and the choices she would soon have to make again. Jira, he said, his voice gentle but firm, whatever happens next, we'll face it together. You don't have to do this alone. Jira looked at him then, her gaze intense, as if she were searching for something in him. For a moment, it felt like she was reading the depths of his soul, understanding something about him that he hadn't yet come to terms with. You don't understand, she whispered, stepping closer to him. If I use this power, there's no going back. It will change everything. It will change you. Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing with the implications of her words. I'm ready. Whatever comes, I'm ready. Jira studied him for a long moment before slowly nodding, her eyes softening just slightly. Then we face it together, she said quietly. And with that, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The truth was out. And now there was no turning back. The winds outside had picked up once again. But within the ancient chamber, it was as if time itself had slowed. The crystal, now pulsing softly, bathed the room in an ethereal glow, casting long shadows across the walls covered in alien markings. Ethan stood beside Jira, their eyes locked on the artifact before them, its power filling the space around them like a living presence. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of decisions yet to be made. Jira had shared everything with him, the truth of her people, the power of the artifact, the cost of using it. Now, the final moment was upon them. The hunters were close. Their ships circling the planet, ready to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. But the real battle was not against them. The real battle was with the power that had torn her people apart, the very force that stood between Jira and her future. She turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of resolve and fear. You don't understand what this power can do, Ethan. It's not just an artifact. It's a part of me, a part of everything I once was. If I use it, I could rebuild my people, restore them to their former glory. But at what cost? Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped closer, trying to meet her gaze. Jira, you don't have to rebuild them. You don't need to fix what's already been broken. You've already proven you're stronger than they ever were. You've survived. You've found something worth fighting for. But if you use that power, it might change everything. Not just for your people, but for you. For us. She shook her head, her fingers brushing against the crystal once again, the energy within it thrumming with life. You don't understand. I've spent so much of my life running from this, trying to escape it. But every day, I felt its pull. The power. It's mine to command. And I can't ignore it anymore. I can either wield it and bring about the change my people need, or let it consume me and risk losing everything. Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand, the warmth of his touch grounding her in the moment. You're not alone anymore, Jira. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself. We can face this together. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. But the power, it's never been meant for one person to control. It's dangerous. I could lose myself in it. I could become the very thing I've been fighting against. Ethan's grip tightened, his voice unwavering. And what if you don't use it? What? If you let it go, let the past stay where it belongs? Your people may be lost, but you've found something better. You've found a reason to keep going. You've found yourself. That's worth more than any power. Jira looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of everything she had experienced. The betrayal, the loss, the endless pursuit. But in Ethan's eyes, she saw something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. A future that wasn't bound by the mistakes of her past. A future where she could choose who she was, not what others had tried to make her. With a deep breath, Jira stepped back from the pedestal, her hand still warm in Ethan's. I spent too much time trying to rebuild what was lost. But maybe it's time to let go of the past. Maybe it's time to stop running. The ground trembled beneath them, and a deep hum filled the air, signaling the approach of the hunters' ships. The chase was almost over. The final confrontation was at hand. Jira turned to face the entrance of the cave, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a storm cloud. I could use the power to defeat them, to crush them. I could end this once and for all. Ethan stood beside her, his voice low but steady. You don't have to destroy them, Jira. You don't have to become what they were. You've already shown them that you're stronger. You don't need that power to prove anything. Jira closed her eyes, letting the quiet hum of the crystal fill her senses. The power was still there, waiting, tempting her to use it. But for the first time, she understood. She didn't need to fight with destruction. She didn't need to recreate her people, her past. She needed to create something new, something of her own. I've spent my whole life running, she whispered. But I don't have to run anymore. I don't need their power. I don't need to be anyone but myself. With a final glance at Ethan, she turned back to the crystal. She took a deep breath and then slowly, deliberately, she stepped away from it, letting the energy fade. It wasn't the end of the battle, but it was the end of her war with herself. The chamber was silent. The energy, once so intense, had quieted, and the glow of the crystal dimmed. The hunters were close, their ships closing in on the planet's surface. But Jira didn't move toward the artifact again. She didn't need it. She had found the strength to face them without it. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice calm but resolute. Ethan nodded. Together, they turned toward the entrance of the cave, ready to face whatever awaited them. The hunters would come. They would fight. But Jira wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for herself, for the chance to choose her future. And with Ethan by her side, she knew she would never be alone again.